All right, good morning, everyone. So this week is our last week of lectures. I know we're all very upset about that, but I have saved one of my favorite lectures for last, and hopefully this lecture sort of brings the whole course full circle. Before we get started, we are going to play the second to last Jeopardy round. So I see we've got Thomas, Brian, and Cameron ready. Hello, Brian. So what we're going to do is play the last round of live Jeopardy, and then on Thursday I'll just have Colton, Jackie, and Roger stick around, and you guys will play after class. So whoever wins today and whoever wins on Thursday will receive extra credit on the final exam. Okay, usually I give you guys like 3 raw points for extra credit. So do we have any questions before we begin? All right. Hold on. All right, so Thomas, Cameron, and Brian, if you'll turn your mics on, we will go ahead and begin the second to last Jeopardy game. Okay, Thomas, you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, let's see. Here we go. There we go.
14.
Nope.
12.
12. Oh, Cameron got you. I will accept 11 or 12. In the book, Cody says he's 11 going on 12, which is very young to be participating in gang violence, but that's what happens. Okay, here we go.
Is it Risk?
That is correct, Cameron.
That wasn't me.
Oh, who said that?
That was me, Dr. Hill.
Oh, oops. Thank you for being honest. Sorry about that.
I should have took it and ran with it.
I know. All right, here we go.
In isolation, when someone is isolated from their peers and whatnot, usually whatever they go in isolation with can become more extreme, so they can come out even more irrational or more violent than when they went in. And with separation, it can kind of be like cancer, where all you've done is move the cancer from one cell block to another, and it can just spread gang activity further.
Yep. Both of those are wonderful answers. All right.
The great program.
Mm-hmm.
Violence disruptors?
That's not what the program's called.
Pure violence.
Yes, was that Cameron? Okay. So on the quiz, I think I just finished grading this. If you got one and not the other, you just got half a point. Okay.
The great program is not effective in, or is not effective in reducing gang membership.
Very good. Sorry, Brian, he beat you to it.
There was no response time there. It was just instant.
I mean, whoever's fastest wins. You know this, Brian.
In person, so much easier.
Oh, okay. I really don't think that has. Are you saying it was a technological glitch? Is that
I'm saying this is fraudulent and there should be a re-election and a recount.
We need, yes, okay, take it to court, okay? All right, so Cameron is our winner. He will receive extra credit on the final exam. And on Thursday, we will have the last round with, who did I say? Roger, Jackie, and who else? Who was it? Colton, that's right. Okay, all right. So let's start our last lecture. So this week, what we're talking about is desistance. Okay, before we start, just quickly, I have finished grading y'all's, like this class. Roger, now who's in the background? Who's that? Is that Colton?
Yeah, I got Colton now, man.
Okay, Colton, you're still logged on over here. Doesn't matter. I don't care. Okay. Let's make sure that we're paying attention and not talking the whole time, okay? All right, yeah, I have concerns about you three. Okay, so your section of the class, all of your policy briefs are graded. So if you wanna know what you got, just shoot me an email and I can let you know. I can't publish them just yet because I am not done with the other class, but usually I put a huge dent in them during the Steelers games. So hopefully on Sunday, by Sunday evening, I will be done or almost completely done with this. I'm definitely going to be done before Wednesday, not this Wednesday, like next Wednesday, because that's when I'm taking a break. So I'll be done before then for sure. But if you want to know what you got, I'm done with y'all's section. I can let you know, just shoot me an email. Okay. So this week we are talking about desistance. So desistance is the opposite of recidivism. So recidivism means you commit another crime, and desistance means you have stopped committing crime. This is one of my favorite areas to study because in order to study desistance, basically you have to get the life stories of people that commit crime. So this basically involves really long conversations with institutionalized offenders, which is like one of my favorite things to do. Okay, so desistance is defined as the voluntary termination of serious criminal participation. But this is a really difficult phenomenon to study because crime is so sporadic. So in other words, termination from criminal events happens all the time, right? If you just think about speeding. So if you're looking at desistance from speeding, if you sped this morning, but you haven't sped since then, have you desisted from crime? What if you go a week without speeding? What about 5 years, 10 years? Even a 5 or 10 year period crime-free is not evidence of complete desistance, because if I stop collecting data at 10 years and then you commit a crime at the 11th year, you're not actually a desister, right? So realistically, true desistance can only be measured retrospectively if you have a cohort of people that are deceased. That way you know that they truly desisted from crime and they're not going to keep committing crimes. So another issue when you're trying to study desistance involves what you're actually studying. So there's two ways to study desistance and only one of them is correct. So a lot of people will study the decision to desist, right? So you talk to a group of offenders and you say, are you ready to desist from crime? That's not actually a true representation of if they are desisting from crime. So there's the study of the decision to desist and the ability to actually do so. So the ability to desist, actually desisting, is what you want to study, not whether or not someone is ready to desist from crime. Because when you talk to inmates and you ask them, are you ready to desist from crime? Or, you know, what's your plan after this? They all say the same thing. Well, most of them will say things like they're sick and tired of the life. They've seen the light. They're never coming back. A lot of them find Jesus. When you talk to inmates, the large majority of them will tell you, I'm never coming back here. But a lot of them actually wind up committing crimes again. Because when you talk to them, especially, so there was a guy at the Allendale dog program who actually started the dog program and was released from prison, and he did really well. He was volunteering at the shelter that provided the dogs. And after about a year and a half of release from prison, he stopped showing up at his volunteer job. And he was arrested about 2 months later because he had gotten back into heroin. And if you look at his arrest photo compared to the man that I saw that was incarcerated, it looked like two totally different people. He started doing heroin again and started robbing people for money. And I mean, he looked exactly what you would think he looked like. When I saw him in the institution, he looked like a sweet old man. He kind of looked like Santa Claus. That is not what his arrest photo looked like. So when you talk to them, they'll say that they started off well, but that old habits die hard, and then they slip back into the lifestyle that led them straight into a prison cell. So this point was actually empirically proven in an Oxford University study of recidivism. So the researchers asked a sample of prison inmates whether they were ready to go straight or desist from crime, and 80% of them said that yes, they were sick of the life of crime and they're ready to desist. But then when they followed up with those same people 20 months later, 60% of them reported that they had been committing crimes again. So there's an acute difference between understanding the rationality of quitting crime and understanding the process or the ability to actually do so. So if you think about the analogy of quitting smoking cigarettes, this makes sense. So if you've ever smoked cigarettes or you know someone that smokes and you've watched them try to quit, it's the same thing. So people quit smoking for a lot of logical reasons. It's unhealthy, it smells bad, it's expensive, right? But most smokers who give up smoking also resume smoking again several days or several weeks or several months later because of the temptations. So my best friend is a cardiac ICU nurse, and we've been best friends since the 4th grade. And she has been smoking cigarettes since the two of us were terrible little teenagers at the age of 16. Doing some shoulder tapping, asking sketchy people to buy us cigarettes outside of a grocery store. I quit smoking cigarettes when I was in college. She has been trying to quit for the last 20-something years. She's quit 4 times since then, and the last time she quit was actually on November 10th. And so she's been cigarette free for 7 days. But again, this is the 4th time she's tried to quit. And every time, the longest she's made it is 4 months. But every time, old habits die hard. It's usually when she's, out partying or drinking. That's when she has a temptation for a cigarette. Or she usually smokes a cigarette right before she begins a 12-hour shift in the ICU. Sometimes that's the cigarette that she breaks, or the cigarette on the drive home after that 12-hour shift. She just went home to celebrate her dad's birthday, and both of her parents are smokers. She was really proud of herself. She went the whole weekend being around all that cigarette smoking, and she didn't smoke. But this is the same thing with crime. I have a lot of times students ask me, why don't people that have gone to prison why do they keep coming back? Why don't they just quit crime? And that's because it's the reason that you would want to desist has nothing to do with the ability to actually do it. So if you think about quitting smoking, the reasons to quit smoking don't have anything to do with the ability to maintain that desistance from cigarettes. It's the same thing. So when you're studying desistance, actually being able to maintain desistance is the thing that you want to study, not the reason why they would want to stop committing crimes. So understanding that the study of desistance is a maintenance process, that's what's the focus here. So desistance might be more productively defined as long-term abstinence from crime among individuals who had previously engaged in persistent patterns of offending. So the focus here isn't the transition or the change, but rather the continuity or the maintenance of crime-free behaviors in the face of all of the obstacles and frustrations that ex-offenders have when they re-enter society. So this emphasis on an ongoing behavior is also present when you talk to offenders. They subconsciously will speak of desistance as an ongoing process. So if you talk to inmates or you talk to people on parole that are trying to maintain desistance, they refer to it as going straight or going legit or making good. They don't even realize that they're talking about it. The way that they're phrasing it is a work in progress. So the way that they phrase this, or this definitional distinction, has implications when you're actually trying to study this phenomenon. because if you're studying termination or cessation, right, the stopping of something, that usually looks for single causes or one change, right? Whereas if you're studying the maintenance or the continuity of something, that looks for, it doesn't look for a single cause, it looks for a bunch of factors that sort of interact and come together to keep you crime free or to maintain this behavior. So when you're looking for a reason why somebody stopped doing something, there's usually one single cause, right? But that would be the decision to desist, right? So people have a terrible time in prison, right? They don't want to go back to prison. That's their decision to desist. But their ability to actually maintain desistance usually has nothing to do with their experience in prison. It's their environment and the interactions that they have once they leave prison. That's what determines if they're able to maintain crime-free behavior. So if you think of my friend Erica, her decision to desist, she's a nurse. Why would a nurse smoke cigarettes, right? Let's stick with that one, okay? But that has absolutely nothing to do when she's out partying and she wants a cigarette, right? She's not thinking, oh, Nurse Erica says, no, I shouldn't be doing this for for my health. It has everything to do with the environment that she's in. So ironically, the study of desistance might be best constructed as a study of continuity rather than change. So we're looking at the continuity of non-deviant behaviors. So there's actually a lot of criminology research that looks at continuity, right? It's referred to as continuity research, and they focus on things like personality variables, environmental consistencies, interactions between the two that allow for long-term persistence in various behaviors, not for single causes. So when you're studying desistance, you're looking for multiple things that come together to maintain this behavior, not one single cause. And like I was saying, the ability to maintain desistance or abstinence from crime is usually completely unrelated to the reason why they wanted to desist from crime in the first place. So you don't want to study why someone stops crime. You want to study how they can maintain this behavior. So in terms of criminal offending, it's really no great mystery why someone would choose to avoid crime. But the bigger question is how they are able to make good or go straight in the face of widespread social stigma, limited career opportunities, as well as social exclusion. How they're able to maintain desistance is what you want to study. Nobody cares why they stopped committing crime. That's not a really big mystery. And usually it has nothing to do with how they're able to maintain desistance. All right, so when we're talking about the theories that go into desistance, there's two big ones. There's ontogenetic and there's sociogenic. And there are a lot more than these two, but I'm just sort of boiling it down into the two big points. So ontogenetic has everything to do with your biology, and sociogenic has everything to do with your environment. So let's start with your biology. Let's talk about ontogenetic explanations. So anytime you're trying to explain desistance, you have to be able to explain the effect of age on crime, because we know the age crime curve plays such a large role in people's ability to desist from crime. So what the ontogenetic explanations say is that a young offender will eventually age out of crime with the sheer passage of turning the offender into a responsible adult. So the question of age in crime has been around since 1833. We have known about the age crime curve. And in the 1940s, there was a really big experiment done by two Harvard professors, the Glukes. They were a married couple. You may have heard of them if you took a criminology class and you were learning about either a life course criminology or social bond theory. This is a really famous study. And what they did is they basically went through the records of several hundred juvenile delinquents, and they looked at their behaviors over the life course. And then they separated, again, these kids had already aged out of crime. I think most of them were dead at this point. So they could actually look at desistance. And they split them into groups of people that had managed to desist from crime and those that hadn't. And they looked for differences. And what they said is that age is the only factor which emerges as significant in the desistance process. The only thing that was able to predict who committed, when these people stopped committing crimes, was age. All of the other factors weren't significant anymore. Age was the only thing that was significant. So in the 1990s, Gottfriedson and Hershey did other similar studies, and they reached a similar conclusion. And they said that crime declines with age. Spontaneous desistance is just that. Change in behavior that cannot be explained, and change that occurs regardless of what else happened. So they go on to explain that the effect of age on crime is several things. And I'm going to say it, and then we're going to go through each part. So biological theorists, or people that subscribe to the ontogenetic explanations of desistance, say that the effect of age on crime is natural and it is direct, okay? So what they're saying here is that age affects you, and that affects whether or not you commit crimes, right? So it's a direct effect. Sociogenetic theorists say that there's moderating variables. So they say age affects your environment and the things that you do in that environment, and that affects whether you continue to commit crimes or not. So ontogenetics theorists say the effect of age on crime is direct, it's natural, it's biological, and sociogenics say it's indirect. Age affects your environment, which then affects whether you commit crimes or not, okay? So let's think about this direct effect. The other thing that Gottfriedson and Hershey are saying is that this question of age on crime and this direct effect is invariant, means it does not change. So it's invariant across social, temporal, or economic conditions. So let me explain. So they're saying this direct effect on age on crime does not change regardless of your social situation. So who you hang out with, the peers, your friends, your employers, and your entire social relationships, it doesn't matter who you're hanging out with, the effect of age on crime does not change. They're also saying it's invariant across temporal conditions, meaning time. So we have seen the effect of age on crime since 1833. So it doesn't matter what year or what decade or what century we're talking about, age on crime is still the same. And the last place that they say it's invariant is through economic conditions. So it doesn't matter how rich or how poor you are, you still see the same effect of the age crime curve, right? That people start committing crimes around 15 and age out around 25. So because that effect is so solid, anybody that's going to explain desistance, whatever theory they use, they have to be able to explain how age affects crime. And ontogenetic theorists say it is a direct effect, it's biological. So then they turn to the biologists to figure out why that is. So what about our age is determining our age crime curve? And biologists have linked it to testosterone. So there's all kinds of research that has linked the production of testosterone in our body to our criminal behaviors. So if we're thinking about that, right? So the production of testosterone increases in your adolescence, and then it levels out once you become an adult, right? So that explains, right, that spike in crime during the age crime curve. But how, if we're talking about the effect of testosterone on crime, how does that explain female criminality? Who can figure that one out?
Dr. Hill, isn't it the female crime rate significantly lower than the male one in the first place?
Right. So put it all together.
So because they don't have the same, I don't know how to put it, but I guess drives or motivations, they just don't commit as much crime in the first place. It's
Kind of. Well, do females have testosterone? What?
females have a lower amount of testosterone, and it differs from female to female, which is why some females are more aggressive and other females are not.
Exactly. So if we see that male testosterone levels are here and females are here, that explains the gap between female and male criminality, right? So this all sounds perfect. The problem is the results are mixed. So some studies show a strong link between the production of testosterone and criminality, and other studies don't show that same link. So the criticisms of ontogenetic explanations, the big one is the ontogenetic fallacy. And this one says that the ontogenetic fallacy is the assumption that changes in behavior are caused by biology only, as opposed to the interaction between biology and environment. So when you're only looking at testosterone, you're not looking at the effect of biology on your environment. So that's probably why you're seeing some mixed results, that it's not a perfect correlation, it's not a perfect fit, because ontogenetic theorists are falling prey to the ontogenetic fallacy, and they're excluding environment and social factors completely, which can push or pull you towards crime. All right, so that right there, those are your ontogenetic explanations. So now let's talk about your sociogenic explanations. So whereas the ontogenetic explanations say the effect of age on crime is direct, the sociogenic theorists say that the effect is indirect, right? So what we're saying here is that the offender needs positive environmental factors to desist from crime. So positive environmental factors would be things like a college education, maybe a master's degree or a PhD, a good job, a marriage, a car payment, children, a mortgage. All of those things are positive environmental factors that keep us from committing crimes. So this idea encompasses the idea of social bond theory or social control and the influence of informal social control. So what we're saying here is that this effect of age on crime is indirect, right? So as individuals grow older, most people get more positive social interactions, right? Or social environmental factors. So as you come out of the age crime curve, you're more likely to have a college education, you're more likely to have a job, you're more likely to have a marriage, children, responsibilities that make you less likely to commit a crime. So the sociogenic theorists are saying that the effect of age on crime is indirect. Age affects these other things, which then keep you from committing crimes. So Sampson and Laub often refer to these positive environmental factors as stakes in conformity. So a stake in conformity would be things like having a good job, having, a marriage with 2.3 kids, having, a college education. All of these things, the more stakes in conformity you have, the more you have to lose, therefore the less likely you are to commit crimes. So if we think about the effect of age on crime here, we're saying that as you age out of crime, you have more stakes in conformity, which means you're less likely to commit crimes. So just like the ontogenetic explanations, Sampson and Laub, social bond theories, all of those stuff, those results are mixed as well. So it's almost like the two of them can't be separate. They kind of have to come together. So let's talk about some of the criticisms of the sociogenic explanations. The first one is self-selection. So you've been hearing me talk about self-selection a lot. And if you think about this, and I've done a lot of criminology journals, like Sampson and Laub and Gottfredson and Hershey are on two opposite sides of the desistance question. And essentially, journals will publish diss tracks of one and the other. So Sampson and Laub will publish something that completely disseminates Gottfredson and Hershey's theory. And then Gottfredson and Hershey will publish something, and they just go back and forth and back and forth. So let me explain how they sort of tear each other down. So Sampson and Laub are saying that age directly or indirectly affects crime by giving you stakes in conformity, right? Gottfredson and Hershey say, no, it's still a direct effect, because what they're saying is that there's something inside of you, something biological. A lot of times they refer to it as self-control theory. So if you've ever heard of that, they're saying that something inside of you gives you self-control, right? And that same thing that is inside of you determines if you get stakes in conformity and if you don't commit crime. So it's not that age is affecting your stakes in conformity, which then affects your ability to commit crimes. It's saying, they're saying that whatever is internal is making you self-select into choosing stakes in conformity and thus choosing not to commit crimes. That it's not the stakes in conformity that affect, it's this internal biological thing that's predicting both things. So that's what self-selection is. Gottfredson and Hershey are saying that people self-select into getting married and having kids and getting a job and getting a mortgage. And those same people are the ones that self-select into not committing crimes. And self-selection works the other way too. People that self-select into not having stakes in conformity are the same ones that self-select into committing crimes, right? So people that don't get married, that don't have a good job, that don't have a mortgage, they are the same ones that commit crimes. And Gottfredson and Hershey are saying it's something internal about these people. Usually they say they have low self-control. That's predicting that they have no stakes in conformity and commit more crimes. So that's the first criticism of the sociogenic explanations. The next criticism is that it's oversimplifying. So let's think about how we would actually study this, right? So say we give out a survey to a group of people that have stopped committing crimes and a group of people that persist in criminal behavior, right? And one of the survey questions is, are you married? Yes or no? Do you have a job? Yes or no? Do you have kids? Yes or no? Do you have a mortgage? Yes or no, right? So we run the results and we see that it's not a direct link, right? Well, the critics of the sociogenic explanation say it's not the marriage in and of itself that keeps you from doing it. It's the type of marriage you have, or the relationship you have with your children, or if you enjoy your job, right? So if you have a stable job, but you hate that job, that's not really a stake in conformity, because if you lose that job, you're not really going to be that upset about it because you hate it, right? Same thing if you have a very toxic marriage, it's not really a stake in conformity if it's not something that you consider, like if you wouldn't mind losing it, right? So different types of social ties, different types of stakes in conformity will be the ones that predict whether you commit crimes or you don't commit crimes. So it's not as simple as a black and white check yes, right? It's, is this something that you would consider bad if you lost it? So it's not the marriage in the abstract that stops criminality, it's the things that come with a marriage. So is this something that you would hold dear if you lost, right? All right, questions about sociogenic and ontogenetic explanations. All right, we're going to do one more because this is a lot of information. So now that you kind of understand a little bit about desistance, now I want to teach you how you would actually study this. So the best way to study desistance is through interview. So like I was just saying, right? Testosterone alone can't predict 100%. Filling out a survey can't predict 100%. You need to talk to this person to sort of fill in those gaps. So this is where we turn to phenomenological criminology. So that's just a really fancy word for an attempt to understand criminal decision-making through an examination of the offender's self-image or the image that they are attempting to uphold. So the way that they see themselves and the way they want the rest of the world to see them is what we're interested in here. So knowledge of the offender's construction of their situation is really essential to a fuller understanding of why there are differences in incidences of offending among similar situations, right? So we see two people that are married, one continues to commit crime and the other stops. So what is different between those two, right? So understanding the way that they see their marriage might be the key. So analyzing these subjective experiences, these personal experiences of offenders that go straight or desist from crime can really only strengthen our understanding of why, of the roles that social bonds and aging can play in the desistance process. So the best developed theoretical argument in this field comes from a guy named Neil Shover. And he did a bunch of interviews and basically boiled it down to three big themes. And he attributed desistance from crime to changes in an offender's identity, self-concept, and the framework that they employ to judge themselves and others. And he said that the primary elements of desistance can be boiled down to these three themes. And desistance is always something that has fascinated me. And every time I get a chance to interview inmates, even if it's not really within the scope of my research, I will usually ask a question or two that's related towards desistance, just out of sheer curiosity to see if they will say some of these three things. So I've got some very specific examples of ways that you can get that information from direct quotes from inmates. So the first indication that an inmate is ready to desist from crime is this sort of theme of the acquisition of an altered perspective on their youthful activities. So this means that they see the way they behaved as a juvenile in a different lens. So let me give you a specific example. So I talked to a group of inmates at Allendale Correctional Facility. They were in the beekeeping program, and I asked them basically how they viewed their youthful activities. You know, I was kind of getting at this question. And one guy said that, he said, I used to be a piece of work. So that right there to me pinged, this is an acquisition of an altered perspective. Another guy that was in charge of the dog program after the heroin addict left prison and then came back, he was incarcerated at the age of 19 for putting a pipe bomb in a girl's mouth. We can talk about that later. That was a whole thing. I talked about this last semester and the students would not stop talking about Jeff, the pipe bomb maker. Anyways, he was incarcerated since the age of 19. I met him, he was around 42 or something when I met him. And so I asked him about his experience basically growing up in a prison. And he said when he was incarcerated, his main goal in life was to give him hell. And that he misbehaved so much that within, I think, 3 months of being incarcerated, he found himself in a maximum security prison. He started referring to those prisons as gladiator prisons. And he's able to completely talk about his experience in the gladiator prison and the way that he behaved. It's like he's talking about a different person. And that's another example of seeing the way that they behaved as a youthful person in a totally different lens. So they don't have to come out and say, I have an altered perspective on my youthful activities. It's phrases that to me ping, that's what you're talking about. So saying, I used to be a piece of work. I wanted to give them hell. And you can tell based on the tense that they use. If they talk about it in past tense, like I used to do this, that's usually an indication as well. So having somebody sort of see themselves in a new light in the way that they behaved when they were younger is usually the first thing that I look for if I'm trying to predict if this person is going to desist from crime when they get released. The next concept you look for is a growing awareness of time. So this is things like, I can't tell you how many times I've heard inmates say, I'm not getting any younger. So understanding that life is sort of passing them by and they're stuck in this institution, like they can't wait to get out and to do better than they did before. I've had inmates tell me that they're ready to be wifed up, that they, are ready to get a good job, that it's been too long. Like things like that usually are an indication of a growing awareness of time. The last theme that you want to look for is that they are ready to, that their goals now include pro-social things. So a lot of the guys in the dog program will say things like, I can't wait to give back. I can't wait to volunteer. So the Humane Society that partnered with Allendale Correctional Facility, a lot of those guys that have impending release dates work with Vicki Scott, who's the coordinator there, to instantly start volunteering when they get released from prison. Guys that are really excited to use the GED that they got in prison to get a good job. So if they have aspirations that now include pro-social goals, that's usually another indication that they're ready to desist. On the other hand, when I was like 22, I got granted access to go to some Florida prisons and speak to inmates in the dog programs there. I don't know who gave, I can't believe I got permission to do that as a master student, but I did, learned a lot. One of the guys I was talking to was a 19-year-old gang member who had 2 tears tattooed on his face. And I asked him what because his release date was like within 6 months. And so I was like, what are you looking forward to doing when you get released? What are your plans? And his plans were to go straight back to the street, and that he missed his brothers, his gang members. That is not a pro-social goal. So I hear that and I think this guy is going to persist in criminal behavior, right? So he was also still right smack in the middle of the age crime curve. So that statement was not very surprising. So the guys that are able to include pro-social goals, if that's what they're focusing on, that's usually an indication that they're ready to desist. People that miss the streets and miss their hood and miss their brothers, that's somebody that's going straight back into the lifestyle. All right, so that's the last thing we're going to cover for today. On Thursday for our last class, we're going to go over probably the most famous phenomenological criminal study that there is. Anybody that studies desistance cannot miss the Liverpool Desistance study. It's a fabulous study. And your reading for this week is, so we're going to talk about sort of the scripts that people follow. So there's a condemnation script, which means that these guys are not really ready to desist from crime. And there's a redemption script. So we're going to talk about the themes that you see in each script. And I'll also talk about how you pull those themes out. There's an interview I can show you. It usually takes like 3 days to do this interview with inmates. It's the life story interview. It's how you get these themes. It basically involves like a 3-day interview with each inmate to understand what script they have, like sort of what frame of mind they have. And that usually determines if they are going to persist in criminal behavior or desist from crime. So we'll be talking about that on Thursday, and then we'll have the last Jeopardy quiz. The 3 champions will stay after class and play, unfortunately not in front of everybody else. Do we have any questions before we call it a day?
I have a question, Dr. Hill.
Yes.
Can I ask you about something after class in case anyone else has a question?
Yeah, unfortunately, this class is being recorded.
It's not, yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Just like I always record the second lecture for in case anybody misses it. So if you don't want other people to hear that question, you might want to just shoot me an email. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When's the last day to get your study guide reviewed?
Probably before the exam. Are you guys taking it on the 1st or the 8th? I forget. I have one section taking it on the 8th and one section taking it on the 1st.
So like pretty much any time before then?
Yeah, maybe not on Thanksgiving Day. Like, I don't really want to do it then. I have to travel a little bit we'll make it work. Just shoot me an email, and we'll make it work. We'll figure it out. But you have until the day before the exam, pretty much. Questions? All righty. Well, I'll see you guys on Thursday for your last class.
All right, Dr. Hill.
Yes.
So how do I get a internship approved by you?
Okay, so right now we are still setting up the internship program. So like we don't really have it, like to get criminal justice credit, it's not ready to go yet. We are waiting on approvals from like 19,000 departments, and bureaucracy moves really slowly. Right now the Career Center can give you credit for it, but it's not going to be like a cluster A class.
What do you mean by cluster A class, ma'am?
So once we get this approved, you would register for Criminal Justice 499, and it would be like a 3-credit course that would count towards your cluster A's.
So I'm applying for this letter internship at the moment.
Okay.
And so I if I get the internship and I attend the internship and get the 90 hours or whatever, down the line, can I get credit for that once?
Probably not. Because if you think about it, that's like a really slippery slope. Like if we, like when I was in charge of internships at Florida State, we did not offer retrospective credit. And I have a feeling the Citadel is going to do the same thing. Because like I said, if we give you approval, then I've got a student who's, 3 credits shy of graduating and is like, oh, but I did an internship like 6 years ago, I have a feeling it's going to be a bit of a slippery slope. When are you starting this internship?
So I'm applying for the summer internship for SLED. I don't know the exact dates yet. I think it's going to kind of vary based on my advanced camp date for Army. Right. So there's that, but I do want to do the internship to get my foot in the door or just have some sort of experience down.
No, you should definitely do it. And like, what year are you? Are you a junior?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, I mean, worst case scenario, like you could do a second internship. Like there's no such thing as too many internships. Mm-hmm. Have you talked to the Career Center yet?
Yeah, they said to ask you about getting credit for it. They didn't say anything about the whole,
like, I feel like I'm talking to a brick wall when I talk to them sometimes. I'm like, look, lady, like we can't just approve it like that. Like the Department of Social Service, not social services, social sciences, like we need to get approval from the dean. We need to work out I submitted like a a syllabus template. Like I sent all this shit at least a month ago and it's been like crickets. So we can't just start a program for without all the approvals. And I told them that. And they just keep being like, every time they've got an intern interested in criminal justice, like they just send them to me. That being said, I got granted temporary approval to do 4 interns this semester, but it's a very specific program. Like it's like a virtual internship with the Charleston Police Department, and they're doing like a research project with me. So that's like totally separate. But as far as like having kids like go out and do this, like we need things in place before we can approve that stuff.
Okay.
So did they what sort of credit can the Career Center give you?
I don't honestly know. They keep giving me, I mean, I've probably sent 3 emails out in the past day or 2 days, and it's been, I'm going to refer you to this person. Here, do you need help on your resume? No.